Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into exactly why you became the responsible one in every single relationship you have. Look, if you're clicking on this, you're probably exhausted. You're just deeply, deeply tired of carrying the emotional weight of everyone around you. So we're not going to waste any time. We're getting right into where this comes from, and more importantly, how you can finally put that heavy weight down. Let's get right into it. I want you to just sit with this question for a second. Are you the one holding it all together? You probably know exactly what I mean by that. You're the designated emotional caretaker in your life. When a room goes weirdly quiet, you're the one who automatically jumps in to fix the silence, right? When your partner's mood suddenly shifts, you manage it. You smooth over those rough edges. You instinctively make sure everyone else is comfortable, usually way before you even realize how you're feeling. It's this invisible, silent, and just incredibly heavy load that you're carrying around every single day. This is what the daily reality actually looks like for the chronic emotional caretaker. You're anticipating the needs of your friends and partners before they even open their mouths. At work, you're the one absorbing all that ambient tension, basically acting like a human shock absorber, just so things keep running smoothly. And to do this, you're constantly shrinking your own personal space and your own needs. You fix the awkward silence because, well, you feel like it's literally your job to keep everyone comfortable. But here's the absolute kicker. You actually feel guilty when you realize you're unhappy or exhausted. You're doing all the emotional heavy lifting for everyone else at your own profound expense, all while looking totally and completely flawless and competent on the outside. Honestly, it's an incredibly lonely way to live. Okay, we need a total paradigm shift here. Listen to this carefully. This is not your innate personality. It is a childhood survival adaptation. You weren't just born with some genetic trait that makes you the world's emotional pack mule. No way. This intense hyper-responsibility, it's actually a brilliant, trauma-induced adaptation to an early environment that was emotionally empty or unresponsive. You learned how to do this. Honestly, you had to learn it. Let's take a step back to the true origin of this behavior. We need to look at what's called the nuclear family emotional process. In family psychology, there's this core idea that a family doesn't just operate as a bunch of totally separate individuals. Instead, it operates as a single, highly sensitive emotional organism. In this kind of system, family members automatically co-regulate each other's functioning and anxiety. Basically, if one part of the system is intensely distressed, the whole system feels the tremor. And the members, they instinctively move to stabilize it. To really see how this builds, let's compare a mature family system with an immature one. In a secure, mature family, the parents regulate their own anxiety. They act as the shock absorbers for their own lives, right? And that leaves the children totally free to just be children. They can explore their individuality without any fear. But in an emotionally immature system, the parents project their distress. They literally don't know what to do with their own anxiety, so they bleed it out into the family organism. And a perceptive, sensitive child, they pick up on that immediately. They quickly learn that the only way to prevent a total system collapse is to suppress their own needs and stabilize the adults. The child learns very early on that to survive, they absolutely must manage their parents' feelings. Let this heavy truth just breathe for a second. The child catches the contagion of the parent's distress and feels responsible for making the parent feel better. That is the absolute essence of emotional enmeshment. It forces a complete role reversal. Subconsciously, the child realizes that their physical and emotional safety relies entirely on the adults in the room being calm and functional. So what happens? The sensitive child steps up. They catch that contagion of anxiety, and they become the emotional caretakers for the exact people who were supposed to be taking care of them. Now, the crucial point is what happens to that child's identity as they grow up. They develop what psychologists call the role self. This is a pseudo-identity that a child adopts to secure their place in an emotionally unengaged or immature family. And it completely replaces the spontaneous, messy, natural expression of who they truly are. You basically stop being your real self, and you become exactly what the family system needs you to be just to maintain equilibrium. You become highly performative. You literally earn your connection and your right to exist in the family by being relentlessly, constantly useful. Building this pseudo-identity takes a lot of work. It requires systematically suppressing your natural instincts and desires. You end up becoming the little grown-up. You know, the kid everyone constantly praises for being so mature and so easy to handle. You internalize all of the family's tension so nobody else has to deal with it. And here is where the real tragedy lies. You actually start believing that self-sacrifice equals lovability.
You develop this deep underlying fear that simply having normal human needs makes you a massive burden to others. So, you build your entire psychological foundation on utility rather than authenticity. You mistake being needed for being loved.
And then time passes. The child grows up. You move out of the house. You get a job. You get into friendships. You start having romantic partnerships. But here's the thing. The adaptation remains. Your nervous system is still running on that exact same old software. You might be an adult on the outside, but inside, you're still operating as if your fundamental survival depends entirely on managing the emotional climate of every single person around you. It's fascinating and kind of heartbreaking to see exactly how this childhood tactic mutates into a major adult problem. Back in childhood, survival meant being low maintenance. It meant being hypervigilant just to stabilize an anxious parent. And you know what? It worked. It kept the peace. It kept you safe. But as an adult, that exact same mechanism turns into crippling boundary compliance, intense people-pleasing, and a pervasive, paralyzing fear of losing your relationships. What started out as a brilliant and totally necessary survival tactic is now just this heavy, exhausting chain, and it traps you in incredibly draining dynamics with basically everyone you meet. Which brings us to a really vital psychological concept, boundary compliance. Essentially, this means having really fuzzy or indistinct personal limits. You basically melt into the demands and moods of others just to avoid rocking the boat or risking any sort of rejection. Because you learned so early on in life that setting limits meant risking the loss of love and connection, you become an emotional chameleon. You agree to things you really don't want to do. You absorb other people's bad moods as if it's your personal responsibility to fix them. You simply cannot bring yourself to say no, because to your inner child, no equals abandonment. And the toll this takes on you over the years, it is immense. Let's look closely at the true cost of this compliance. You eventually end up secretly resenting the very people you care for, mostly because you're constantly giving and never really receiving. You settle for relationships that are just filled with emotional static, where your own needs are totally drowned out by the noise of theirs. You overwork yourself trying to essentially love someone into a good relationship by doing the emotional heavy lifting for the both of you. And ultimately, you feel fundamentally alone, even when you have loved ones all around you. It's a huge paradox. Covering up your deepest needs actually prevents the genuine, authentic connection you are starving for. So, if you want to heal, if you want to stop feeling so incredibly drained by every single interaction, we have to look directly at the lie that's been keeping you trapped. We must confront the core illusion of the role self.
I really want to give you permission to grieve the reality of these words for a second. Sometimes being easy to love as a child becomes being unable to ask for anything as an adult. This is the razor-sharp truth of it all. Your profound competence, your amazing ability to handle everything and everyone, it was built on a foundation of emotional neglect. You learned to be easy because your early environment simply didn't have any space for your complexity or your needs. But as an adult, being that easy person has completely stolen your voice. Your competence is just a beautifully crafted mask for your emotional loneliness. Now, let's talk about liberation. Let's start breaking out of this. You are not a load-bearing beam for other people's emotions, period. It's time to intellectually and emotionally separate your true, authentic self from this trauma-induced role. Adult relationships, they shouldn't require this constant heavy lifting. You are absolutely allowed to exist in a relationship without paying rent in the form of constant emotional management. You do not have to earn your place by fixing everyone else's distress.
So, how do we actually put the weight down? Here is an empowering framework for stepping out of that enmeshment. First, you have to recognize when you're operating from the role self. Notice that immediate, instinctive urge to jump in and fix a bad mood or to fill an awkward silence. Second, and I'm not going to lie, this is the hardest part, you must learn to tolerate the anxiety of disappointing others. Because when you stop overfunctioning, the system is going to push back. People who relied on your compliance will probably be upset. It will feel terrifying initially. Third, simply stop doing the emotional work for everyone else. Let there be silence. Let other people manage their own upset. And fourth, use all that newly freed up energy to reconnect with your true self's basic needs. Look, setting limits is going to feel incredibly uncomfortable at first, but I promise you it is the only path to genuine reciprocal intimacy. I want to leave you with a final, deeply provocative thought to carry with you today. Who would you be if you finally put the burden down? If you just stopped managing everyone else's emotions, what space would open up for your own life? Really think about that. You have spent your entire life holding it together for others, acting as the foundation for their comfort. I think it's time to see what happens and exactly who you can become when you finally let yourself just be.